There's a particular kind of silence that comes right before your life splits in half. It isn't loud, it doesn't announce itself, it just hums quietly under the sound of everyday routine. The hum of the refrigerator, the click of a pen, the faint echo of someone you thought you knew moving further away every day. My name is Grant Holloway, and for 15 years, I made my living studying patterns in markets, in people, in risk. I wasn't the sort of man who made impulsive decisions. My job as a financial advisor at Veltri Dynamics in Denver, Colorado was about precision, predictability. It was the one field where control meant safety. And then, one March evening, control vanished, not with an explosion, but with a phone call. My wife, Melanie, was supposed to be in Miami at a pharmaceutical sales conference. Instead, her voice came through the line with a calm that felt rehearsed. "I'm not coming home, Grant. I've met someone. His name is Russell Phillips, my boss." It took me a second to recognize that this wasn't a dream. She sounded steady, almost polite. The way she used to sound when she tried to calm nervous doctors before a presentation. And then came the real wound. "I've already emptied our shared investment account," she said. "My lawyer told me it was the smart move." I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just listened to the weight in her tone, how final it was. Then I put the phone down, turned it face down on the counter, and opened my laptop. The number glowed against the screen, $212,000, transfer pending approval. She tried to take everything. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I'd seen the signs long before. 6 months earlier, there were small cracks in the pattern of our lives. Melanie had always been busy, conferences, dinners, team-building retreats. But then the receipts stopped matching the stories. A dinner charge in Denver and a night she was supposedly in Chicago. A missed call from Russell at 11:03 p.m. that she scrambled to explain. I'm not an emotional man by nature, but I do understand numbers. And when something stops adding up, you don't argue with the formula. You correct it. So I made changes, quietly, carefully. I restructured our accounts, creating what looked like a normal joint portfolio with modest savings, while moving our actual assets, the real money, the product of 12 years of work, into a trust under my sole control. The paperwork went through in the blur of routine signatures. Melanie never noticed. She was always multitasking, checking emails, texting during dinner, pretending to listen. When I created the trust, I added an extra layer of protection. Any withdrawal over $10,000 required dual authorization, a small clause that most couples wouldn't think about. For me, it was insurance, not against theft, but against blindness. Now, as her voice faded from my ear and the call ended, I realized the system I'd built had just saved me. She believed she had taken everything, but what she had taken was a shadow. I sat at the table and let the silence wrap around me. I thought of all the years spent chasing comfort, and how easily comfort can hide rot. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and thought about numbers, how every betrayal has a balance sheet. Assets, knowledge, foresight, preparation, liabilities, love, illusion, trust. The balance was shifting, and in a strange mathematical way, I felt calm. 17 years earlier, I met Melanie Rhodes at a financial conference in Chicago. She wasn't the most beautiful woman in the room, but she was magnetic, confident, ambitious, able to make everyone feel seen. She worked for Lunar Ventures Pharmaceuticals, a company that was small back then, but hungry. I was quiet, the kind of man who notices details others skip over. She noticed that. She said it made her feel grounded, said I was safe. When we married 2 years later, it was like drawing up a life portfolio. We made plans for everything: a home, investments, children. The first 5 years went exactly as forecasted, except for the children. After 3 years of trying, a doctor in a sterile office told us the truth. Low sperm count, he said. Natural conception is unlikely. I remember Melanie crying in the car, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I held her hand and said, "We'll figure it out," but we didn't. Instead, she threw herself into work and I buried myself in spreadsheets. Our home became a waypoint between her flights and my meetings. When I tried to plan something, a dinner, a weekend, she'd already have an excuse. The first real fracture came 3 years ago. I'd booked a surprise anniversary weekend in Aspen. She told me she couldn't go. There was a sales retreat. I went alone. I hiked the trails we'd once walked together. When she called that night, I heard laughter and music in the background. When I asked where she was, she said, "Just with the team." It was the first time I knew something inside us had ended. After that, conversations became transactions. Did you pay the mortgage? Can you pick up dry cleaning? We became roommates who shared a schedule, not a life. And then came Russell Phillips. He was everything she thought I wasn't. Extroverted, charming, self-assured, loud. A regional director who knew how to command a room. Melanie adored him. She volunteered for every project he led. She said, "He values my ideas." It wasn't just infatuation, it was validation. And for a woman who'd spent years feeling stuck beside a man who measured everything in numbers, validation was addictive. I didn't confront her. I watched. I counted. I waited. The morning after her call, sunlight came through the blinds as if nothing had changed. The smell of coffee filled the air, but the kitchen felt like someone else's house. I sat at the table, laptop open, staring at the transfer request. $212,000 pending approval. I could click deny and lock her out instantly, or click approve and watch her drain the last illusion of partnership. I did neither. I closed the screen, took a slow breath, and opened the drawer that held the file labeled Trust. Inside it was every document I'd prepared. Account numbers, titles, signatures. Her signature. That was when the doorbell rang. Standing outside was Vanessa, Melanie's closest friend and co-worker. She looked nervous, like someone about to deliver bad news at a funeral. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. We sat in the kitchen, neither touching the coffee I poured. "She asked me to get some of her things," Vanessa said, eyes fixed on her purse strap. "She's not coming back on it." "I know," I said. "She also wanted me to check if her transfer went through." There it was, the real reason for her visit. I turned the laptop toward her, the words glowed bright. "Pending approval." "Dual authorization," I said. "Anything above 10,000 needs both signatures. It's in our agreement." Vanessa swallowed hard. "She's going to be furious." "That's her choice," I said, echoing the calm I didn't feel. When she left, suitcase full of clothes but no jewelry, I watched her car pull away. The house fell silent again, and I realized the strangest thing. I didn't miss Melanie. I missed the person I thought she was. By the afternoon, I was at my office, where everything still made sense. Numbers, charts, logic. At lunch, I walked to the bank. I began the next step of the plan I'd quietly built months earlier. By 3 o'clock, my phone had 7 missed calls. I ignored them. At 5, I drove to Thomas Wilson, my lawyer and friend. He was a decade older than me. Calm, deliberate, a man who'd seen every version of betrayal the world could offer. He listened, scanned the documents, and finally nodded. "We'll file tomorrow," he said. "Financial misconduct, marital abandonment. Colorado doesn't need fault, but evidence matters in settlement." I nodded slowly. "This isn't about revenge, Thomas," I said. "It's about balance." He smiled slightly, spoken like a true numbers man. That night, I didn't feel angry, just steady. The kind of steady you feel before a storm breaks, when you finally stop pretending it isn't coming. 4 days passed before I saw her again. It was a Thursday evening. I came home from work, and there she was, standing in the living room, perfectly dressed, perfectly furious. She hadn't even bothered to return her key. "What did you do?" she demanded. "The money is gone." Her makeup was immaculate, but her eyes gave her away. They were right at the edges, wild. I placed my briefcase on the counter and answered quietly, "No, Melanie, the money isn't gone. It's exactly where it's supposed to be." She stepped closer, shoving her phone toward me. "Transfer denied. Dual authorization required. Fix this. Now." I looked at her, this woman I'd once thought of as my partner, and said, "We need to talk about the divorce." That word stopped her cold. "Divorce?" she echoed. I meant to talk about that after I got settled." "After you took the money," I said. Her jaw tightened. "Half of it is mine. I earned it." "Did Russell tell you that?" I asked, my tone even. The way I'd talk to a client making a reckless investment. The color drained from her face. "This isn't about him," she said. "It's about trust." "Trust," I repeated. "You mean the one thing you already sold?" Her expression shifted again. The saleswoman returned. Gentle voice, soft persuasion. "I was emotional, Grant. I didn't mean for things to end like this. We can work this out. We always do." But the truth was, we hadn't worked anything out in years. I saw through it. The performance, the manipulation, the well-practiced empathy she used like perfume. "I've already hired a lawyer," I said. Thomas Wilson, you can have yours, contact him. Her eyes flared. You already? You can't just lock me out of our money. I'll fight this. That's your right, I said. She needed me to lose control. I refused to give her that satisfaction. She looked around the room, searching for a weapon that wasn't literal. Her gaze fell on a framed photo from our anniversary in Aspen, the trip she skipped. She hurled it against the wall. The glass shattered, scattering reflections across the floor. Russell was right about you, she hissed. No ambition, no backbone. I bent down, picked up the photo. My face under the spiderweb of cracks almost looked like someone else's. I'll need your key back, I said. This isn't over, she snapped. She dug into her purse, threw the key onto the table, and stormed out, heels clicking like gunfire. When the sound faded, I swept up every shard of glass. Then I poured 2 fingers of bourbon, called Thomas, and summarized the confrontation. He chuckled softly. You're calmer than most people would be. I'm a numbers man, I said. The math's already in my favor. The next morning, my assistant at Veltri placed a heavy white envelope on my desk. The letterhead belonged to Hayes, Logan, and Pierce, a downtown law firm with marble floors and 3 named partners. Inside was a demand letter from Carlton Hayes, Melanie's attorney. It accused me of financial abuse, wrongful control of marital assets, and restriction of rightful access. It ordered the release of funds within 72 hours or face legal action. And there, in the CC line, was a name I expected but still hated seeing. Russell Phillips. He wasn't just her lover now. He was in her corner, using his corporate influence to pressure me. I read the letter twice, then folded it neatly. At noon, I met Thomas for lunch. They're overplaying their hand, he said. We'll file an amended petition, include her attempted withdrawal, the unauthorized transfer, and a restraining order to keep her from entering the home. He paused, then smiled. They think you're weak, Grant. Let them. It'll make the fall quieter. That night, I sat in my office, lights dim, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. I opened the investment dashboard. Every number, every transaction, every document was in order. The trust stood untouched, legal, verified, unassailable. Sometimes power doesn't roar, it just waits. 2 weeks later, a message arrived from an unknown number. Coffee. Important information about Monsieur Feyrel Café, 2 p.m. today. There was no signature, just curiosity and risk. I went. The Ferrari Café was half empty that afternoon, sunlight filtering through slanted blinds, making everything look like a photograph. I sat in the back corner, watching the door. 10 minutes later, a woman in a tailored charcoal suit entered. She spotted me immediately. Jessica Harlow, HR Director at Lunar Ventures. We'd met before at company events where she and Melanie exchanged polite smiles that hid corporate competition. She walked over, set a small thumb drive on the table, and spoke in a low voice. This conversation never happened. What's on it? I asked. Emails between Russell and Melanie, she said, 14 months worth. She kept her gaze steady, but her hands were trembling. Why are you giving this to me? Because Russell has done this before, she said. 3 times that I know of. He pursues married women who report to him, convinces them to leave their husbands, promises promotions, then discards them once they're compromised. But this time, he went further. I leaned in. He's been selling research data, Jessica said quietly, using Melanie to access files she shouldn't even have permission for. The FBI is already looking into it, but quietly. If they go public, she could be collateral damage. My throat felt dry. You're sure? I wouldn't risk my career otherwise, she said. Use that information however you need to. She stood, adjusted her jacket, and walked out. I sat there for a long time, staring at the drive. Then I ordered coffee I didn't touch and plugged it into my laptop. The evidence was there. The affair, the messages, the planning to leave me. But beyond that, confidential documents, research attachments forwarded from Melanie's company email to Russell's personal account. One thread hit hardest. Russell, once you're free from the accountant, we'll move forward. Miami office director, the works. Melanie, what about his financial expertise? Could be useful. Russell, trust me, we don't need him. Just get what you can from the accounts. They'd planned to use me, to strip me for data, for access, for convenience. I copied the drive and drove straight to Thomas. He read silently for 10 minutes, then exhaled. This changes everything. We have leverage that could end the divorce in one move. I don't want her in prison, I said. I just want out. He nodded slowly. Then we'll use this as a negotiation tool. She signs on our terms, we keep it quiet. No need for the FBI to get involved. That night, Melanie's lawyer sent an offer, 60% of all marital assets, the house, and alimony. I forwarded it to Thomas with 4 words. Time to use leverage. The counteroffer went out the next morning. She would relinquish all claims to the trust, accept a one-time $50,000 settlement, and sign a non-disclosure agreement covering the marriage and her company activities. Attached was a single email from the drive, enough to prove we weren't bluffing. The response came within hours. We need to meet. Thomas's office smelled like cedar and paper, the kind of space where calm had authority. I arrived early, reviewing the files again. At 10 a.m., Melanie walked in with Hayes. She looked thinner, sharper. Her confidence was brittle, like glass stretched too far. Hayes started smoothly. We're here to find a reasonable compromise. Thomas slid our proposal across the table. Our terms are non-negotiable. Hayes glanced down the page. His practiced smile faltered. $50,000? You can't be serious. My client contributed equally to all assets. Thomas didn't flinch. My client is offering silence, which, considering your client's extracurricular activities, is generous. Melanie's head snapped up. You're blackmailing me. No, I said quietly. I'm protecting myself. Thomas opened the folder and laid out printed copies of the key emails. Hayes' eyes darted across the lines, color draining from his face. These are private communications, he said. These, Thomas replied, are evidence of corporate espionage, which federal prosecutors might find interesting. Melanie's composure crumbled. Russell said it was just market research, she whispered. I looked straight at her. Then why did you forward restricted files to his personal email after midnight? Silence. Hayes leaned in, whispered something urgent. She shook her head. We need to confer privately, Hayes said, his voice strained. Thomas nodded. Take all the time you need. The FBI certainly will. They stepped outside. Thomas leaned back in his chair, smirking. You're holding up well. I rubbed my eyes. This isn't how I thought marriage would end. He chuckled. It rarely is. 20 minutes later, they returned. Hayes looked like a man swallowing glass. My client will accept your terms, with one condition. You agree not to disclose any of this to her employer or to law enforcement. Thomas looked at me. It's your call. Whatever she'd done, sending her to prison wouldn't undo the years or the loss. I nodded, agreed, provided the papers are signed today and filed without contest. Hayes nodded. Thomas reached into his briefcase, pulling out final drafts. The sound of signing pens echoed louder than it should have. 2 hours later, it was done. Melanie stood, her hands shaking just slightly. Was any of it real for you? She asked. I met her eyes. All of it was real for me, that's the difference. When she left, Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder. Congratulations. In 90 days, you'll be free. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. That evening I went home, the city lights flickering against the window like half-remembered conversations. The contract copies lay on my desk, their signatures already drying. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like accounting, numbers alarming after months of chaos. I poured myself a drink and stared at the empty living room. The shadows fell where her things used to be. The books on the shelf no longer leaned toward each other. Even objects looked lonely when the person who placed them was gone. Then I opened my laptop. The thumb drive still sat there, cold and metallic, a silent witness to everything. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I created a new email account, one that couldn't be traced to me, and attached only the documents that implicated Russell Phillips. Not the ones that tied Melanie directly. I didn't need revenge that left her in handcuffs. I just wanted the truth to surface. The message went to Lunar Ventures' CEO, Board of Directors, and Compliance Department. No explanation, no signature, only attachments and a subject line. For internal review, urgent. Then I deleted the account permanently. 3 days later, a short article appeared in the Denver Post Business section. Pharmaceutical executive resigns amid internal investigation. Russell Phillips, Regional Director for Lunar Ventures Pharmaceuticals, has stepped down effective immediately. The company declined to comment. That was all. No scandal, no trial, just a quiet exit. A line item erased from the ledger. My phone buzzed that night with a text from Melanie. I know it was you. I stared at it, then powered the phone off. Some messages deserve no reply. 6 weeks later, I sat across from Thomas in his office, signing the last divorce papers. He handed me an envelope with a faint smile. Inside was a summary of Melanie's new employment contract. She'd taken a low-level sales position at a small distributor in Phoenix. Entry-level, modest salary, no corner office, no champagne conferences. She had to sell her car, Thomas said. The $50,000 won't last long at her spending rate. I nodded. No satisfaction, no joy, just equilibrium. That afternoon I received another envelope, this one with Lunar Ventures' seal. The letter was polite, almost formal. They'd traced the anonymous tip to me, but rather than pursue legal action for possession of proprietary information, they offered a consulting role. Your expertise and ethical handling of sensitive material demonstrate the standards we wish to rebuild in our financial compliance division. It was signed by Jessica Harlow with a handwritten note beneath her signature. Justice comes in unexpected forms. I read it twice. Then, for the first time in a long while, I smiled. The consulting job turned into more than a contract. Within months, I was promoted to head financial compliance, a department that hadn't even existed before. I built a team that believed in transparency, checks, and oversight, the kind of architecture that keeps corruption from hiding in paperwork. Work filled the spaces where pain used to live. Each morning felt a little more like possibility. 2 months after the final decree, I received an email from Vanessa. The subject line read simply, "Focus ignore. Don't. Melanie and Russell have separated. He never kept his promises. She's struggling, but too tired to admit it. She asked if I knew whether you were seeing anyone. I told her I wouldn't discuss your life. Take care of you." I read it twice, then closed my inbox. I didn't hate her. I didn't even pity her. I just understood. People don't betray because they wake up evil. They betray because they think they've run out of options. Melanie wanted to be seen. Russell wanted to win. And I wanted things to stay predictable. We were all playing by our own metrics until the market corrected itself. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, even in love. 1 year after the call from Miami, I stood in the foyer of my new house. It was smaller than the old one, but it was mine. The air smelled of cedar and new paint, and the morning sun spilled across the hardwood floor like a fresh start. Through the back deck windows, the Rockies rose in the distance, steady, ancient, indifferent to everything human. They reminded me that permanence doesn't come from people. It comes from things that endure regardless of our mistakes. The job had become full-time. The salary was good, but the work mattered more. We built policies that prevented misuse of funds, trained new hires in financial ethics, audited departments that had once looked the other way. My trust, the same one Melanie had tried to drain, now funded scholarships for graduate students studying corporate accountability. Turning a betrayal into an investment felt poetic. My phone buzzed. Catherine, an attorney from the Lunar legal team, had texted, "Dinner tonight? Our third date." She wasn't dazzling like Melanie, but she was calm, grounded. We talked about hiking trails and compliance law, topics that would have bored my ex, but which felt peaceful now. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror while adjusting my tie. The man standing back looked older but lighter, as if he'd shed an unnecessary weight. I realized then that the hollow space inside me had finally closed. The betrayal no longer defined me. It had just taught me the cost of misplaced trust, and how balance, financial or emotional, isn't achieved by revenge, but by clarity. I locked the door behind me and walked toward my car. The mountains loomed ahead, solid as truth. Numbers can't lie when you do the math right. Some things in life, integrity, foresight, the quiet courage to start again, are the only assets that don't depreciate. If this story has a moral, it isn't about money or divorce. It's about structure, about building a life with the same care you'd build a portfolio. Diversified, protected, self-sustaining even when markets crash. Love without boundaries becomes dependency. Trust without oversight becomes denial. And denial, in the long run, is just deferred loss. I learned that preparation isn't cynicism. It's respect for yourself, for what you've earned, and for the possibility that people change in ways you can't predict. Melanie and I were never enemies. We were a failed equation. Inputs that no longer balanced, but even failed equations teach you something about constants, patience, awareness, honesty. So when people ask me now whether I'd ever marry again, I tell them yes. But next time, I'll bring not only my heart, but my due diligence. And if anyone listening to this finds themselves in the same storm, don't let bitterness make you reckless. Sit with the pain, document the facts, build your exits quietly. The storm will pass, and when it does, you'll see the numbers again, clear and clean. Because in the end, the math always tells the truth.